Hello, everyone, and welcome to Deckbuilding Derezzed. I'm your host, Code Marvelous, and today I'm joined by Seamus, another friend from across the Atlantic in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Okay.
So, so I wanted to bring you on because Seamus is the author, shall we say, of the modern Prometheus build for Atom, which has been getting a little bit of traction lately on Netrunner DB, and you recently won an average sized tournament with it.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your Netrunner journey, how you got into the game, and what kind of made you gravitate towards Atom.
Well, I sort of missed the boat on the start of Netrunner despite picking up a core set, and I was sort of bemoaning that fact to some friends of mine, while we were playing a board game, one of whom played Netrunner, and he just suggested I come to a tournament that week, and that he'd lend me decks. And from that moment on, I was hooked. Um, how I came to Adam. I think when he was spoiled, and we didn't know any of his cards, but we just saw that you start with 3 directives installed. I thought that was a really interesting proposition. I assumed, or at least hypothesized, as some other people did, that that might mean you'd get a range of directives, and so you'd be able to do that sort of biotech thing of either playing to the hand that you draw, or at least playing to the opponent you're drawn against. And then that didn't happen, which is fine. Uh,
It's fine. It's fine, FFG. It's fine.
it is fine. I think the way that his directives work and are balanced is really good. Anyway, um, I think possibly the thing that really triggered it for me was safety first, and the idea of getting a free draw every turn, because I've been playing around with rugby, and everyone was talking about that being the big problem. That card, I mean, the reduced hand size that we were talking about being a problem. And I thought, I don't know, I think this card might be amazing. And together a list, and it had some serious issues, and I refined it a bit, and it was a bit less rubbish. And what we have here, this middling deck at best, is the result of many refinements on slightly worse decks.
Well, I mean, it's also important to note that you have a fair bit of success with underdogs in a general sense because you also piloted Kit to fourth place in the UK Nationals in 2015.
Did, yeah. I think Kit is, whilst she's underpowered, she's also underrated. Um, the most wanted list hitting clone chips is a bit of a problem with 10 influence, but the stealth rig you can put together with her is really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, and you and obviously Chris Hinkies and a couple other people always are like, Kit's fine. It's just you have to pilot that little bit better. But if you can do it, you can get a lot of mileage out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I see people, it often comes up, discussions of underpowered cards in the first couple of cycles, or underpowered IDs, and I sometimes see people suggesting that Kit should have been 15 influence. At 15 influence, Kit would have been, without a doubt, the best Shaper ID and possibly one of the best IDs in the game.
I think 12.
Exactly what I was about to say, and exactly what a lot of people say. I think even Lucas has publicly said now that Kit's influence is too low. But to be honest, then, if she had 12, you'd still be keeping clone chips most wanted list, so she'd be down to 9. So, future spoiler perhaps, I am trying to work out a post most wanted list Kit deck, which, if I get working at all, I'll post as well.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loves to see Kit get built. So I think it's interesting though because the reason why I bring up your previous Kit play is because Adam fits a similar role where his early aggression is incredibly high. So when you were kind of putting together this build, what did you kind of gravitate towards as the core idea behind the deck?
Well, I think you're correct in saying that there is sort of a thematic through line there. The idea that you can be building not necessarily board state, but the free draw sort of allows you to be developing your game whilst consistently pressuring the core. And that can either be by getting accesses through single subroutine or end-run subroutine and an insignificant subroutine pieces of ice early, or it can just be the threat of doing so. So, you run HQ, they res a rack round or whatever. You don't even need to go in that turn. but you can, and the corp knows that you always can. So
Right.
it's keep coming back to that free draw from the safety first. Though that was definitely the real hook that got me. The idea that you could be in a clickless fashion, building your hands, getting forces into play. I think also I'm quite a lazy runner and in some ways deck builder. So one of the other IDs that I played the most is Ket. So
Okay.
I think basically I just can't be arsed finding icebreakers and dealing with ice in normal ways.
That's fair. Well, so you're gravitate towards getting around ice as opposed to building a standard rig.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, or at least having like a leg up in the race to find answers to quartz ice. And obviously, well, I mean, some kit lists do try to attempt to play without sort of a full conventional rig, but relying on fens and Omega. My kit deck set up
Right.
for breakers for everything, but you didn't need to do it immediately. You didn't even need to do it potentially even in the mid game. Certainly, there was a game I played in the elimination of the Nationals where I think I only ever installed Refractor, and that was against RP, and it was against Dave Fowler, so
Right.
I got quite lucky in that game. But I had the SMC, but just the threat of a second breaker meant I never needed to install a second.
Right.
And Adam can sometimes allow you to do that as well, and just always be running on any problem. I played a game the other night where the only thing I installed breaker-wise all game was a single fen.
Yeah, I mean, and that can definitely come up through my own playtests. People on Jinteki have been like, so there must be a video coming out for Adam because people could jump into my games and they're like, oh, he's playing Adam every single game. There must be a video coming up soon. But yeah, let's talk about his third directive, which I think is also one of the ones that really gives him legs, but is also one of the ones that hurts him the most.
Yeah. I would say the other two downsides are either really bad dependent on your draw or really bad dependent on your matchup. This one, almost every matchup has the potential to really, really screw you. Early on, you need to be so careful that you don't hit, a Chrissy Grid in hand, or, well, I say careful, you can't really control it, but it's a real pain when you do, and there's a number of sort of deck building choices as you get to, which are specifically aimed at dealing with that.
Right. But for that terrible cost of lost money, you do get the ability to access an additional card from HQ forever.
It's fantastic. It makes the threat of HQ pressure so real that it makes other servers easy to get into. It's not that hard for most corps if they really put their mind to it to stop you immediately getting into HQ a second time on turn 2. If they've got agendas in there after you've accessed 2 cards first turn, they're probably going to double ice HQ. But that's them now double iced and double rezzed on HQ on your second.
Right.
Which, I mean, even Gabe doesn't do that. Gabe will get them to res 1 and then install a second and not res it until you try and go for the offense site and res us. The fact that Adam can get them to res 2 pieces of ice on HQ second time is brilliant. And it seems.
Hang on, I just lost your audio. Hang on, I just lost your audio. Looks like we lost him. Give me just 1 second. So Seamus, if we're looking at this deck and we're starting at the top, let's kind of go through and talk about the card choices and why they're in there. So we have 3X career fairs, which kind of makes this deck look more like maybe an Ian deck than maybe something that you would expect with like a lot of high-speed aggression.
Sure. Interestingly, while it's sort of arbitrary to start at the top, it's actually very appropriate for this deck. So Career Fair is one, just a good card. I think we've all accepted that. 2, it works incredibly well with Adam for at least a couple of reasons. One of which, obviously, is that in terms of economy, that he doesn't have to pay influence, but it's quite limited. Quite a lot of that that's good is resources. So you're incentivized to play daily casts anyway. Katie Jones is always good. Earthrise is good draw, particularly if you don't have to pay full price for it. So that's good anyway, and Career Fair is good for getting those out. The other reason it's good is because you can play it from, it means you can play, say, a daily cast from 0 credits. So in the hypothetical situation where we hit an asset that we have to trash first turn and it takes our credits out total below the 2 for Dirty Laundry or 3 for daily casts, we can chuck the Career Fair out, we're generating income again. The final reason it's good is it gets 2 cards out of your hand for a single click, which means if you Dirty Laundry into HQ cast a single subroutine piece of ice in the first turn, you've got 1 click left, which means you can Career Fair out a daily cast or anything else, and that means you're down to 2 cards, activating your free draw from the first turn.
That was what I was going to say. Is the other really good thing is it gets more cards out of your hand, so you get more procs of your passive ability.
Absolutely.
So Dirty Laundry, when I was playing, I would say that this is really, really just good because if you're going to run money, if you were going to be forced to run first click, you might as well make money.
Absolutely. I'm actually more of a fan than a lot of people of Dirty Laundry generally. It ends up in a lot of my decks, but in Adam it's great. If you've got to run first click, and particularly if you're at sort of a mid or like early midpoint of the game where you don't think you're going to be able to get an access, or the clock's already res all their ice that you might otherwise want to get into restoration resources, fire off a Dirty Laundry into archives, you click the 3 credits. Good.
Yeah, seems good.
And also, again, low credit cost to play, so you can play it after being forced to trash an asset. Also, the other thing I almost forgot, if you play a Dirty Laundry and access a high cost trash asset, you're 2 credits lower, so hopefully you won't have to pay it. And then you get your credits at the end of the run.
That's also true. So, in the opposite note of that, having lots of credits in your pool at a given time, we also have 2x stim hacks.
So they are the most recent change to the deck. This slot used to be 2 data suckers, and I'll talk about why they got cut when we get down to programs. Stim hack is, again, just a universally agreed good card. It's particularly good with Adam because, as we know, you have to often run the first click, either because you have found Dr. Lovegood or because you want to use always be running, at least for parts of your breaking. So I found I was not super regularly, but regularly enough to notice, finding myself in a situation where I would love to run second click after taking some money off Katie Jones. So Stim Hack is there for those turns where you need to get into R&D, you've got your RDIs out, but you're not confident you're going to get through with your Overmind or whatever. And as I come to as well, there's a self-modifying code in there, so you can sometimes get yourself a cheap break for it as well.
Yeah, and it's also a huge amount of remote pressure.
Yeah.
Alright, we've got Sure Gambles for the same reason Sure Gambles are in every deck. We have 3x Brain Trip, which might be my favorite card in runner card in Data and Destiny.
It's deceptively great. If you can get a brain chip early and score just even 1 2-pointer, it makes everything so sweet. Overmind become great. Your hand keeps filling up with free draw. I wish that I didn't have to run 3 of them just because it's annoying having so many dead draws in the deck, but you want it early, and the cost of having the dead draws is worth having in there.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who don't know, it's a 2-cost console that has memory X and hand size increase X, whereas X is the number of agenda points that you have. This is just a crazy card because it creates an avalanche. As you get closer to victory, it gets easier for you to win, and it gets harder for you to be flatlined. It's just unreal how much this synergizes and rewards you for the risk early on when you're playing him.
I know we were talking in the run-up to this about what an Adam breaker might look like, and you're throwing around the idea of like a breaker that starts very weak and snowballs in the way that this does. Honestly, the snowball effect from this alone, the breaker would have to have such downsides for that not to catapult Adam into a still unreliable, but on his good games, utterly ridiculous idea.
So we have 2 E3 feedback filters, which I imagine are to support always be running, but also to support the primary breaker for the late game, which is the Overminds, it really looks like. So tell me a little bit about, do you mulligan for this in the opening hand if you don't have it?
No, not unless. If I had a hand that I wasn't particularly happy with anyway, I would consider mulliganing for it against Blue Sun. So the reason that it's gone back up to running 2E3 is because this is almost exactly the same deck that I took to a recent team tournament in the UK. So that means more Wayland than you'd see in sort of a less confined meta, or constrained, I suppose would be the term. The deck isn't fantastic at breaking big ice. Well, it isn't if it doesn't have an E3. If it does, then you happily pay your 2 clicks and however many credits you've required and go on your way. So that's why we've gone back up to 2 of those. It's also just nice to have. It means you don't have to worry about Sarugi or Call to Big Kamanu, which can become problematic in the later game, but we can get to that. I wouldn't mulligan for it, but it's nice to see early. It also, it would still be in the deck if this wasn't the case, but it has the added benefit of showing up one of the weaker matchups, which is HP Glacier. So being able to quickly credit through their bioroids.
Oh yeah, it lets you break all 3 subs on an EG2.
Yeah.
It lets you do all sorts of things that you wouldn't really be able to do effectively in this deck otherwise.
Oh.
I'm familiar with that struggle all too well because I'm a noise player. We have Plascrete Carapace for the same reason Plascrete Carapace is in every deck.
Well, I would just pause for a moment on that. The deck never used to run Plascrete, and again, it's in there for the reason that we've gone back up to 2E3s, is because this was playing for a more varied meta, where potentially a quarter of my opponents could be Wayland, and a quarter of my opponents could be MBN, and I would say probably half of those have a reasonable chance of being killed.
See, we're living in a whole new world in the U.S. The meta is all like Titan and Blue Sun, like hybrid, like rush kill right now.
Like fools! It belongs in Argus. Argus is the way to go for rush.
Yeah, I mean it's starting to catch on. Argus is starting to catch on a little bit more, but like people are playing like some serious meat damage right now in the United States.
Yeah.
So we have 2 RDIs for late game pressure, effectively give us the same advantage that we have on HQ on R&D.
Honestly, I wish it was 3. Because people have to shore up their HQ so much, and the votes always have to be shored up, you often end up with at least relatively lightly defended R&Ds, and it would be great to be able to draw these and play these earlier. Influence is tight. Hopefully we can get some stuff in Mumbad that frees up some influence elsewhere, right, and get a 3rd RDI in. But no.
So if 3 daily casts, you mentioned them before, there's something inexpensive that we can get down, and it's clickless economy since a lot of our clicks are spoken for, right?
Yeah. All of the, so an earlier build ran a couple of Armitage, and it was such a struggle finding clicks to make that worth it. And so Date Folding again in there for the single click. You also tend to have the MU spare,
right,
a game where you don't. They're less useful the longer the game goes on and you haven't installed them yet, of course. However, even late game, if you've got one and a career fair sitting about, you can use it to clear your hand, get your draw going again, and hey, you're going to get start each turn for no outlay.
So talk to me about what, how do you make the decision on what, if anything, to use Dr. Lovegood on? And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Lovegood enables you to blank 1 card on your side of the board for a turn.
So, Lovegood's a tricky one. I would say probably in around half of games I don't even install him if I've drawn him. Even in the games where I install him, I'll frequently use him to just blank himself, effectively just not using him, although you have to use him to use him himself, blah, blah, blah. I've tried going down to 2 because, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of dead draws of unique cards in the deck already, far more than I'd like. But there's the odd matchup where you just absolutely need him. I know that you mentioned RP. If RP gets 3 nasty things to run into on their centrals and you can't stop, you'll always be running every turn, that is just an absolute disaster. I mean,
Yeah, it was a disaster of a game.
Yeah.
Like, it was so bad. All right, so we have 3 Earthrise hotels, which is once again just clickless draw.
Yeah. Um,
We have 1 Katie Jones. I'm guessing it's only a one of just because by the time we need it, we're probably gonna dig through our deck enough to find it.
sort of. The Plastreet that got put into the deck was in the place of the second Katie Jones. I wanted to take something out that the copy I was taking out of would be a dead draw, rather than something that I could easily want to resolve.
Right.
So I don't know if you need to. I've not, since taking the second out, I've not really missed it. But Katie's always good, and if you've not got something to install from hand, then
right. And if it's early game and you really don't have the ability to break the ice again, and you got an odd click, just Katie Jones. It's always good. We got 3x Public Sympathy, which is really synergizes well with Safety First.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be great if you could somehow guarantee getting your brain chip down and guarantee you scored some points so you didn't need Public Sympathy. But it's so important to get that free draw rolling, which I've got 3. Just the games where you don't see a hand size increase card, or your hand's jammed up with stuff that you can't clear out your hand early and you don't get that free draw going, they're really tough.
Right. So we have 2x Scrubber.
Yeah.
This gives you the 2 reoccurring credits to trash cards, which, I hear is pretty good when you're forced to trash things every turn.
I like it more and more. I think I started out with 1 just as sort of I had a spare influence and I knew that it would come in useful if I drew it. Games where you get 2 set up, it's fantastic. You start enjoying trashing stuff from their hand. It's not just that you don't suffer the penalty of losing those credits. You're clearing out their hand. Wouldn't it be great if you could wait till they're on the table and they paid you them? But once you're not paying for them with real credits, it starts to feel disruptive in the way that Noise's Virus Mill does. I mean, not quite as exciting as that, but
nothing will ever be as exciting as that.
There really won't. It's great.
Yeah, that look of anguish as people look at a card and then put it into their trash is I mean, it's really what I live for as a Noise player. We have a single Atman, which I have found this to be one of the linchpins of this deck.
Yeah. I mean, Atman remains good. I think it's seen a little bit of a resurgence recently because people have become less conscious of their ice strength. There's a lot of deck rolling around with a lot of strength 4 ice. In sort of the heyday of Atman, people were very, very conscious of it, and I think people are becoming less conscious now.
Oh yeah. When Catman was big, you used to count how many ice you had that had identical strengths.
Yeah.
And if you had more than 2 or 3, you had to change it to something else. We would just have the random array of ice to try to tax the data sucker tokens as much as possible.
Yeah. So Atman's there. It's good. It fills holes. It saves you money on Overminds.
Yeah, and on some of the big things too, if you're up against Sync, putting it at 6 for Archangel and Gutenberg feels amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Especially if you can do it from an FMC, so their R&D that look 3 deep with strength 6 ice, run it 3 times with RDIs, and then watch them install over all 3 of those bits of ice the next turn.
Seems good.
Yeah.
Corroder is Corroder. It does things with barriers that are pretty good. Now, there is a single Femme Fatale in here. So, I've used it in my own play maybe differently than you have, so I want you to let me know, what are some of the priority targets when you think about using this card?
So the reason it entered the deck was because curing is a massive problem. And I'd been messing around with various decoders in the deck, and they all had their problems. Zool was 2 influence rather than 1, and expensive as all hell. And Yogg, people have such easy access to cyber decks, and Food Coats is just quite good at stopping you farming data sucker tokens anyway. So, and additionally, obviously, Turing is generally on a server you need to make repeat runs on, at least to deal with the Ash, if not also win side games against Caprice. So, Fem went in as a solution to single curing on a remote, or to allow you to get past 2 by femming one and ADRing through, always be running through the other. In addition to that, it's Fem is still good. If you're really wanting to pressure a server and they've got a full booth on it, sure, you're probably going to be breaking that with always be running, but it's still 3 credits and 2 splits, so you can Fem it. The other big side use, which it wasn't necessarily included specifically for, but is very useful against, is Kamainu, because when your hand size gets as big as it can do in the late game, you don't want to be paying upwards of 7 credits to get through a Kamainu.
Yeah, and it's important to note for people who don't understand that interaction, since Fem, you don't have to pay toll booth money because you're never actually encountering the ice. Komainu never receives its subroutines because you never actually encounter it, so it becomes a 0 credit bypass with Femme Fatale.
Yeah.
We do have a Mimic, which, deals with things like Architect and those lower-end sentries that we need to deal with, but we don't want to use ABR for.
Yeah, I mean, Mimic is still just a generally great card as well. Both Mimic and Corridor are in there to target the other specific anti-AI ice wraparound and Swordsman, because you really don't want to be spending 2 clicks to stop your Overmind dying to Swordsman and still taking a net damage.
Right.
So, yeah. Plus, just generally good.
Right, and it's 1 influence, why the hell not?
Exactly.
So we have 3x Overmind, which is kind of... In this deck, this is our like catch-all, our in-betweener.
So the deck has shifted far more to Overminds. I think it always had 1 emergency Overmind, but it's gone through. I think the Breakers is probably the thing that's gone through the most change of the deck. I'm pretty happy with Overmind. Like everything, it's not perfect, but it gets you the accesses you need, and generally by the time you're relying on Breakers, you have the money to fund it, and you've got increased tokens, and it works.
It does its thing.
Yeah.
It's also, I would say, it's really good against. It's surprisingly good against some of the lower strength ice that's just meant to be gear checked because it doesn't cost you any money.
Yeah.
And we have 1x self-modifying code.
Yep.
Which we've got the MU to have it just kind of sitting on the table a lot of the time. I guess when I was playing, I was just basically using this on my StimHack run to get out whatever I really needed.
Ideally.
Or didn't have.
Yeah. So the reason that there's self-mod rather than additional breakers, obviously you are technically sort of more vulnerable to program trashing then, but because Overmind is universal and because you've got ADR to get you out of scrapes, I've not found it a huge issue yet. Self-mod means that rather than having found 2 of your corrodors and not found either of your 2 mimics, you can SMC for the one you haven't found yet, or as you say, the dream is the StimHack Fem onto the server that they didn't do yet.
It's so good.
So the other thing as well as that is originally I think it fluctuated between 1 or 2 special orders, which is also a bit lighter on the influence. The issue with that is if you're having to run first click, that's no good. You do it the turn before, and that signals the breaker you've got and allows them to put the
Right. That's true as well. Yeah, that was something I hadn't thought of. So, everybody, stay tuned. We're going to do a test run segment. We're going to pilot the deck on Jinteki. Seamus, thank you very much for coming on. I do appreciate you going over the deck with me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So everyone, you can find Anar Black Hats on Facebook, Twitter, and of course on iTunes and SoundCloud. We'll catch you all next time.